All right, let's jump right into this. Today, we're distilling a sermon from Kingdom of God Ministries called Time of Endurance. It really boils down to one tough question. What does the hardship you're willing to go through actually say about what you want most in life? Let's unpack the key teachings. So, this is the single idea that everything else pivots on. The speaker is basically saying that whatever you're willing to put up with, whatever you're willing to suffer through, that's what reveals what your heart truly wants. It kind of cuts right past what we say we value and forces us to look at what our actions and our grit prove we value. So the sermon's entire foundation is built on this one single command, to endure. But what does that word really mean in the spiritual context? What's actually being asked? Well, according to the speaker, this isn't about just gritting your teeth and surviving. No, it's presented as an active, required discipline. It's the mindset, it's the spiritual muscle you have to build to run the race of faith all the way to the finish line. And that finish line, in this teaching, is salvation itself. The speaker uses this really simple but memorable little trick to make his point. He's saying, look at the word itself. The whole purpose of endurance is literally spelled out right there at the beginning. It's the only way you're ever going to get to the END. Okay, so if endurance is the mission, what's the terrain look like? Well, the sermon paints a pretty clear picture of a challenging spiritual obstacle course that every single believer has to get through. Drawing from the book of Matthew, the speaker lays out all these trials that believers should just expect to face. And you'll notice it's not just about the big external stuff like wars and natural disasters. A huge part of this obstacle course involves really personal struggles, like dealing with deception, being hated for your faith, and even betrayal. And this is a point the sermon really hammers home. Some of the toughest, most painful tests of your endurance won't come from the outside world. They'll come from inside the church community. The speaker calls it church hurt, and he argues that navigating this is a critical part of the journey because it tests your faith right at its core, your trust in the very people who are supposed to be on your side. So, with all these challenges on the table, the sermon then pivots from the what to the how. What's the whole point of this struggle, and how is a believer actually supposed to practice this kind of endurance day to day? Using this powerful analogy from the Bible, the sermon frames the believer as a good soldier. And this mindset means you have to be strong in grace, you have to embrace hardship as just part of the mission, and you have to stay focused and not get tangled up in worldly distractions. And the ultimate goal, it's not just about your own survival. It's about enduring so that others might also find salvation. And who's the ultimate role model for this? Well, according to the sermon, it's Jesus, without a doubt. The speaker points to this passage from Hebrews, saying that the crucifixion wasn't just a sacrifice, it was the ultimate act of endurance, facing unimaginable pain and shame, all because he was focused on a future joy. Okay, from here, the sermon takes a pretty sharp turn to issue a very stark warning. It identifies a specific, common practice that the speaker claims can act as a huge spiritual roadblock, something that can actually stop a believer's prayers cold. So the speaker poses this question. He suggests that if you're wondering why prayers seem to go unanswered, or why you're not seeing miracles, it might be linked to a specific spiritual issue that has to be cut out of your life. And here's the hard line the sermon draws. On one hand, you've got astronomy, the scientific study of the stars, which the speaker sees as just observing God's amazing creation. Totally fine. But then, on the other hand, you have astrology, turning to horoscopes and the stars for guidance, and this is labeled without any hesitation as a sinful practice, and even witchcraft. And to be crystal clear, the sermon doesn't mince words here. It explicitly calls the practice of following zodiac signs an abomination. The speaker's argument is that doing this creates a spiritual blockage that literally stops miracles and prevents your prayers from being answered. It's framed as a choice. You either trust God or you trust the stars. You can't do both. So, after laying out all the challenges and giving that really serious warning, the sermon brings it all back to the ultimate purpose. It focuses on the final prize, the whole reason for going on this difficult journey of endurance in the first place. This verse is really presented as the ultimate promise, the core motivation for everything. The whole idea of endurance, with all its trials and pain, is aimed at this one single outcome. According to the speaker, salvation isn't just where you start, it's the prize waiting at the finish line for those who actually endure. And this brings us to a really core claim of the sermon, that suffering is directly tied to worthiness. From this point of view, the trials you face aren't random. Instead, the very act of enduring hardship for your faith is what proves you and what makes you counted worthy of God's kingdom. And so we end up right back where we started, with the sermon's central soul-searching question. It brings everything back to you personally. By asking what you are willing to endure, the speaker is forcing you to take a hard look at what you truly desire. And the suggestion is that your endurance, or maybe your lack of it, is the most honest answer you could possibly give.